Born May 23, 1943 in Borås, Sweden, George Lars Kellgren entered the world when the world was at war. At the intersection of two major railways in south-central Sweden, Borås, like Sweden itself, was working hard to maintain its flexible neutrality. A socialist country caught between the aggressive totalitarian advances of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union.
My father was in the military. We moved from one city to the other in Sweden, so it was quite challenging. You stay a few years, and you have to move, you have to change schools, but that's the same for all military families, I would say. I went through it okay.
Following in his father's footsteps, went off to the Naval Officer Training Program for a few years, but began to see a career in the Navy as a lost cause. Something in the math just wasn't adding up.
They cannot got rid of the ships. Now they had like 2 submarines left and like 10 admirals.
Kellgren went to northern Sweden for formal engineering studies and landed a job in a research department at an arms factory in 1968. When they stopped manufacturing firearms, he went to South Africa for a couple of years before landing a job at Interdynamic in Stockholm. In the 1970s, the Swedish military began looking for a replacement for their Carl Gustaf M45. It was the Kulles Bruta pistol rifle, known to most as the K-gun. One of the firearms that the Swedish government looked at as a replacement was the MP9, a weapon designed by George Kellgren, an engineer with Interdynamic AB in Stockholm. But failing to gain traction, the company in 1979 asked Kellgren to go to the United States.
In the early days when I came to America, we tried to interest American manufacturers to license manufacture this firearm. We ended up down in Miami with the National Gun and Carlos Garcia. We started to work with them and founded the company Interdynamic of America. That continued up till '83. Then I left the company, sold out my share and moved up here and started Grendel.
He was introduced to a woman who would become his wife through a work associate. She was a Cuban who immigrated to America. He was quiet and unassuming. She was fiery and passionate.
It's 2 different cultures that are coming together. Latin, more an emotional type of culture. And then you got the Swedish culture that's totally the opposite. Think twice before you do anything, and you don't react violently to most things. That's a combination. It has worked out pretty well.
Kellgren and his wife started a family and both shared the same strong vision of America and all that it afforded.
I always saw my dad as a figure of kind of being steady, always contemplative, always thinking. My mother was always passionate. Spoke from the heart, very eloquent in terms of the things that she was passionate about, able to really get you to think about things. And that's kind of the thing I grew up with, that passion versus the logic and kind of the pause to consider things quietly. Weapon design is what my father forteed in. He was obsessed with new and inventive ways of getting projectiles downrange.
You don't really know the difference when you're growing up around firearms. You see them all the time, and you think that everybody else really is around firearms all the time. The safety was a big aspect of what we learned. I remember I was 5, I believe, the first time that I shot a handgun and a shotgun, and we would go out to the berm that we had on our property, and he would show us how to do it and the safety of it. And so he was very, very adamant about using firearms and using them safely and teaching you that they are tools that can be used for good if you know how to use them responsibly and safely.
He would have his draft board. He used to do just hand-drawn designs and schematics. It was very interesting to be around that. He was always open to having his work observed by us.
In '91, he started a company called KelTec, and that company was strictly a machine shop to make parts for Grendel. He had the brilliant idea to separate what we would call a high liability company, firearms manufacturer, versus a machine shop.
On September 13, 1994, Congress passed what many still call the assault weapons ban. The ban was a very close 52-48 vote signed into law by then President Bill Clinton.
That was the most damaging blow to our industry. Closed down the whole operation overnight. All the products we were making were covered by the assault weapons bill, so they were all gone. ATF was there next morning doing inventory.
I don't remember that day in my life. I don't remember him coming home stressed or exhausted. I don't remember my mother crying about it. It's just another day. And he had a game plan of being flexible.
You have to be prepared to start with something new again.
He said, all right, we'll shut the doors on Grendel. We'll make KelTec the new firearms manufacturing company.
So we already had started developing the P11 handgun. It was a 10-shot, concealable 9mm. It was not long until we actually could put that in production. That was their first gun. Then came the P32. That is actually quite remarkable because it's a pocket handgun that has a lock breech. Before that, all pocket guns were only blowbacks. Traditional blowback guns, it has to be very heavy and expensive to manufacture. So I would say the P32 is the gun that has had the biggest impact on the industry. Everybody copied it. Unfortunately, in those days, we couldn't afford a patent. After the P32 came the Sub 9 and then the Sub 2000. And after that, you get the PMR 30, KSG.
You know, if you just imagine you're George Kellgren and you've got your CAD and you're punching in numbers and you're designing a firearm, you really don't know what the public's going to think of it. So when the KSG came out, everyone wanted one. I mean, everybody and their brother wanted one of those things. Essentially a 2-foot shotgun that holds, you know, potentially 15 shells. You know, that's never been done. Nobody had seen that before.
The KSG, that was quite surprising the way it took off. Actually, I had to be lucky with most of the designs because you don't know if that's going to sell or not. But up till now, we have had luck. And as you go on, obviously, you got the reputation and you need less of a luck.
George, being a vet himself, he was in the Swedish Navy. When he came to the States and you know, opened his business, that was one of his priorities, is to hire veterans.
It's a very important experience to make you mature, respect others, learn to cooperate with people, be able to take orders. That's why we give preference to veterans.
All the officers that were mentors for me, they always talked about the military as being kind of a leadership workshop, and you see good leaders, you see bad leaders, you see the effect that both bring and the outcomes of these things. It doesn't deviate from what I've learned as a kid growing up from him. The first instance of you take care of your people, they'll take care of you, came from him and his philosophy for business.
There's pride in the fact that we have the flag flying, even on our logo, but it's more so knowing that it's actually foundation up. Everything in here is pretty much 100% US steel, US aluminum, polymer.
Manufacturing is certainly alive and well in the United States, and we go out of our way to source US steel, US components. One of the goals we've had is to have affordable firearms. And to do that with completely US sourced stuff, you would think that's gotta be impossible. And it's not impossible as long as you're okay with cutting your margins down a little bit, you know. We want our product to be available to most people, you know.
He wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for making things affordable for a wide audience. The designs and the methods of manufacturing is kind of where he gets an advantage, using new innovative techniques that can result in the same performance, reliability, but we can make it for less. He wants it to always be that way. He doesn't want to capitalize and burden people with costs, especially when a new product comes online.
I think the first time I really realized that people know him for inventing guns was I was actually in college, and a friend of mine who happened to be 21 at the time told me he had a P3AT. And that's when I first was like, wow, somebody else knows about KelTec and has one of our products. And he knew who my father was, he knew about Grendel. And that's when I started to realize, okay, people actually know who he is and what he's been doing. That's pretty cool.
When a KelTec product or something he's designed in the past would appear in a movie, I thought, wow, that's interesting. You kind of see, you know, branching influences of his work and designs in pulp culture and also in the gun world. So you kind of see kind of the impact nationally he has had.
George Kellgren is an American success story. He immigrated to the United States, became a citizen, became a patriot, and has never taken this nation or the blessings and freedoms it has afforded him for granted.
In the history of mankind, there are only 115 successful gun designers. Most of them you know, or a lot of them you know, like Browning, Stoner, Mauser, Kalashnikov.
Will I find you in there?
Yeah, you'll find me in there. There are even fewer that actually build up manufacturing. Most of the gun designers are working for somebody.
The stuff that we make, you can't really go to the store and get this brand's version of it. You need to get the KelTec version of it, and that has really, in our opinion, kept us as successful as we are. We've never held inventory on any gun, everything's been back ordered, and I think that is attributed directly to having unique firearms.
Even if it was profitable to make ARs or 1911s, that's not that interesting for me because I'm trying to come up with something new. And I would not design a gun that I didn't use myself.
I truly believe he designs stuff just because he likes it and thinks it would be cool and doesn't really worry too much about what the market wants. He designs stuff for himself or things where like this would be really a big improvement, and he'll do it, and if it sells, it sells. If not, he'll work on the next thing. He just loves designing firearms.
It's my entertainment, it's my joy to do this. I don't have to do it anymore for money or anything like that. No, I don't think I'll stop. There's quite a few things in the pipeline.